I always believed that hard work spoke for itself. 5 years of late nights, hitting every target, and leading projects no one else wanted. I was the clear choice for creative director. My promotion was practically guaranteed. But 3 days before the announcement, my boss called me in. He couldn't even look me in the eye when he said, "We've decided to go in a different direction." I asked why. All he offered was, "There were concerns about your personal life affecting performance. I don't drink. I don't have anger issues. But someone wanted them to think I did. It wasn't a rival at work. It was my mother-in-law. Vivian had always thought I wasn't good enough for her daughter. And this time, she decided to ruin my career to prove it. What she didn't know was that I'd catch her red-handed. And at the family reunion, I made sure everyone heard exactly what she did. If your own family tried to sabotage your success, would you stay silent to keep the peace? Or expose them, no matter the cost? Subscribe to the channel and stay with us. Because when I pressed play on that recording, Vivian's world shattered. And mine finally started to rebuild. I wasn't born into privilege. Everything I had, I earned. By 37, I had climbed my way up to a senior marketing executive role at one of Atlanta's top advertising firms. It wasn't luck. It was countless sacrifices, missed holidays, skipped vacations, and working twice as hard just to prove I belonged. When the creative director position opened up, everyone knew I was the front runner. Even my boss hinted at it during meetings. "This is your time, Nathan." I believed him. At home, my wife Elaine cheered me on. She knew how much I'd poured into this. But there was always one shadow lurking over every success: Vivian. My mother-in-law never liked me. From the moment Elaine introduced us, Vivian made it clear I wasn't her idea of a suitable husband. To her, I wasn't wealthy enough, ambitious enough, or polished enough for her precious daughter. It didn't matter that I provided a good life for Elaine, or that Elaine was happy. Vivian saw me as a project doomed to fail. Over the years, I learned to tune out the passive-aggressive comments at family dinners. The pointed questions like, "Still at the same company? No offers from bigger firms yet?" Or, "Elaine, remember when you dated that young lawyer? He's a partner now." Elaine would roll her eyes and change the subject, but every word chipped away at my patience. I told myself it was just pride, that Vivian's opinions didn't matter in the grand scheme of things. I focused on my career, thinking success would silence her. By the time the promotion talks began, I was sure I'd finally earn her respect. After all, becoming creative director wasn't just a title. It was proof that I had made it on my own terms. The week leading up to the announcement felt electric. Colleagues congratulated me in advance. Marcus, my closest friend at work, even joked about celebrating with a fancy dinner. But behind that excitement, something felt off. Vivian called Elaine more often than usual. Whenever I walked into the room, Elaine would lower her voice or quickly end the call. I didn't think much of it, assuming it was just Vivian being her overbearing self. I should have known better. 3 days before the big day, I walked into my boss's office expecting final details. Instead, I walked out blindsided and humiliated. When I told Elaine what happened, she was furious. At my company, at the vague excuse they gave me. But never once did she suspect her mother. Why would she? To Elaine, Vivian was controlling. Yes, but not malicious. I wanted to believe that too, until Marcus pulled me aside the next day. "Man, I wasn't sure if I should tell you this," he began, "but someone from HR mentioned they got a call from a family member." My stomach dropped. Marcus continued. "They said you had a drinking problem, that you've got a temper, that promoting you would be risky." I couldn't breathe. It felt like the floor had been ripped out from under me. I asked Marcus if they knew who called. He shook his head. "Just said it was a concerned relative." That's when everything clicked. The sudden phone calls, Vivian's smug attitude the last time we spoke, her constant belief that I wasn't fit for more responsibility. I knew it was her, but knowing and proving are two very different things. If I confronted her without evidence, she'd deny it, turn it around on me like she always did. And worse, Elaine might even take her side. So I kept calm, for now. Because if Vivian wanted to play dirty, I was about to show her I could play smarter. For 2 days, I barely slept. I kept replaying Marcus's words in my head. Someone from your family called HR. Every time I looked at Elaine, I wondered, how could I tell her that her own mother was the reason I lost the promotion? Would she even believe me? Vivian had always worn a mask. To the outside world, and especially to Elaine, she was the picture of grace and concern. But I'd seen behind that mask. I knew what she was capable of when no one was watching. Still, I couldn't just accuse her without proof. Vivian was too clever, too practiced in manipulation. She'd twist my words, play the victim, and make me look paranoid. That's when Marcus came up with an idea, one that would give us exactly what we needed. We set a trap, he said, leaning over my desk. I'll call her, pretend I'm from a different company doing a reference check. If she really wants to sabotage you, she won't be able to resist. It was risky, but it was the best shot I had. Marcus was known for his quick thinking and smooth talking. If anyone could pull it off, it was him. We rehearsed the call, making sure every detail sounded legitimate. Marcus would pose as a recruiter from a top-tier agency, offering me an executive role with a hefty salary bump. All we needed was for Vivian to believe it. When the day came, Marcus put the phone on speaker and hit record. I sat beside him, heart pounding in my chest as he dialed Vivian's number. She answered on the third ring, her voice as polished as ever. This is Vivian speaking. Marcus launched into his script, explaining that Nathan Parker was being considered for a leadership position, and they were reaching out to family for character references. A subtle touch that made it seem personal and urgent. Vivian didn't hesitate. The moment she thought she had influence over my future, she unleashed every lie she could muster. Well, I must be honest, she began, her tone dripping with false concern. Nathan has struggles. He's a heavy drinker, and his temper can get the best of him. I just worry that additional pressure might lead to unfortunate incidents. I felt my fists clench, hearing her voice, so calm, so calculated, as she dismantled my reputation with lies. It was worse than I imagined. Marcus kept her talking, asking follow-up questions, and Vivian happily obliged, painting me as a ticking time bomb. When she finally hung up, the recording was nearly 10 minutes long. 10 minutes of undeniable proof. I sat there in silence, staring at the phone. Marcus looked at me, waiting for a reaction. But I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt clarity. Vivian had declared war. And now I had the ammunition to end it. Conveniently, the annual family reunion was just days away. Every year, Vivian and George hosted it at their lakeside home. It was Vivian's favorite stage, a place where she could parade her perfect family and subtly remind everyone of her status. This year, I'd be giving the performance. Elaine was excited about the reunion, unaware of the storm brewing beneath my calm exterior. I didn't tell her about the recording. Not yet. I needed her to hear it when everyone else did. So there'd be no room for denial, no chance for Vivian to spin her web of lies. The night before the reunion, I listened to the recording one last time. Every word Vivian spoke fueled my resolve. This wasn't just about a promotion anymore. It was about standing up for myself, and about showing Vivian and everyone else that I wasn't someone to be walked over. I charged my phone, saved the file in multiple places, and rehearsed exactly what I'd say when the moment came. Vivian thought she'd buried me with her words, but what she didn't realize was that I'd turn those very words into the shovel that would expose her for good. The drive to Vivian's lakeside home felt longer than usual. Elaine sat beside me chatting about who would be at the reunion, which cousins just got engaged, whose kids were graduating. I nodded along, but my mind was elsewhere, focused, calm, waiting for the right moment. When we pulled up to the sprawling estate, Vivian was already on the porch, wearing that signature smile. The one that looked warm to everyone else but felt like a dagger to me. "Nathan, Elaine! So glad you could make it," she sang, her voice sweet as honey, laced with poison only I could taste. Dinner was set up on the patio overlooking the lake. The whole family gathered, laughing, drinking, exchanging stories. It was the perfect scene. Too perfect. Vivian floated from guest to guest, playing hostess like she was royalty. But every so often her eyes would flicker toward me, a glint of satisfaction hiding behind them. She thought she'd won, that I'd show up, smile politely, and swallow the humiliation like always. But tonight was different. As we sat down for dinner, Vivian couldn't resist. She leaned in across the table, her voice just loud enough for others to hear. "So Nathan, did you ever get that promotion?" The corners of her mouth curled into a knowing smile. Mocking, challenging. Elaine glanced at me, oblivious to the deeper meaning behind her mother's words. To her, it was just Vivian being Vivian. But to me, it was the final push I needed. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone, placing it gently on the table. "Actually, Vivian," I said, keeping my tone even, "there's something I've been meaning to share with everyone." The conversation around us quieted. Forks paused midair. All eyes turned to me. Vivian's smile faltered for just a second, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. I tapped the screen and pressed play. Her voice filled the air. "Well, I must be honest. Nathan has struggles. He's a heavy drinker." The words echoed across the patio, each lie sharper than the last. I watched as faces shifted from confusion to shock. Elaine's hand froze on her wine glass, her eyes widening with every sentence. George stared at his wife, disbelief etched across his face. Vivian's complexion drained of color. She reached out as if she could somehow stop the recording. But it was too late. 10 minutes. 10 long minutes of her betrayal laid bare for everyone to hear. When the recording ended, silence swallowed the table. No one dared to speak. I looked directly at Vivian, meeting her hollow gaze with steady resolve. "For years, I let the comments slide," I began, "out of respect for Elaine, for this family. But sabotaging my career? That was your choice, Vivian, and choices come with consequences." Vivian opened her mouth, searching for words, but nothing came out. George finally broke the silence. "Vivian, tell me this isn't true," she stammered. I was just trying to protect Elaine. You didn't think I deserved success," I cut in, "because in your eyes I'd never be good enough." Elaine stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the stone floor. Her face was pale, her eyes glistening with tears, not just of betrayal, but of realization. She didn't say a word to her mother. She didn't have to. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of years lift off my shoulders. "I've accepted a position with another firm," I announced. "My start date is next month. Director title, 30% salary increase." A ripple of murmurs spread across the table. I turned back to Vivian one last time. "And just so you know, that recording is already with my former employer's legal team. Expect a call." Without waiting for a response, I placed my napkin on the table, looked at Elaine, and nodded toward the car. She followed me without hesitation. As we walked away, I heard chairs shifting, quiet conversations starting. Family members distancing themselves from the woman they once admired. There was no going back now. Vivian's mask had shattered, and everyone saw her for who she truly was. The drive home was silent. Not the cold, distant kind of silence, but the heavy silence of two people processing a truth they could no longer ignore. Elaine stared out the window, her arms crossed tightly. I could see the conflict written all over her face. For years, she'd defended her mother, believing that beneath Vivian's sharp words was just a protective parent, but tonight shattered that illusion. When we finally pulled into the driveway, Elaine spoke first. I didn't know, Nathan. I swear, I had no idea she'd go that far." I nodded. "I know. That's why I didn't tell you until now. I needed you to hear it for yourself." She wiped a tear from her cheek, frustration and sadness mixing in her voice. "I always thought she was just difficult. But this? She tried to ruin your life." I didn't respond right away, because Vivian hadn't just tried. She succeeded, at least for a moment, but that moment was over. I opened my laptop and pulled up the email draft I had prepared days ago. Attached was the recording, along with a detailed explanation of what had happened. The recipient, the legal department of my former company. Elaine watched as I hovered over the send button. "Are you sure about this?" she asked quietly. I looked at her, my voice steady. "She crossed a line, Elaine, and people like her, they don't stop unless they're forced to." With one click, the email was sent. There was no turning back now. The next morning, I received a response, a formal acknowledgement from the legal team, thanking me for bringing the matter to their attention. They mentioned potential defamation and interference with employment opportunities, serious accusations that could lead to legal consequences for Vivian. But I wasn't done yet. I knew Vivian cared about one thing more than her reputation, her social circle. The elite friends, the charity boards, the image she'd spent decades crafting. So I made sure the truth reached them too. I forwarded the recording to a few key family members, the ones who always seemed to admire Vivian the most. I didn't include any commentary, no angry rants, just the facts. It didn't take long for word to spread. By the end of the week, Elaine's phone was flooded with messages from relatives, some expressing shock, others apologizing for not seeing Vivian's true colors sooner. George called Elaine privately, his voice heavy with disappointment. He confessed that he'd suspected Vivian of meddling before, but never imagined she'd stoop this low. As for Vivian, she went silent. No calls, no texts, no attempts to explain herself. Her silence said more than words ever could. Meanwhile, I focused on my next chapter. The new firm welcomed me with open arms. They valued my experience. And more importantly, they valued me. On my first day, I walked into an office twice the size of my old one, with a team that respected my leadership. It felt liberating. Elaine and I agreed to set boundaries with her parents moving forward. For the first time in our marriage, she saw what I had endured, and she stood by me without hesitation. A few weeks later, a letter arrived at our door. It was from Vivian's attorney, a carefully worded statement claiming that Vivian's comments were misunderstood and offering a private settlement if I agreed not to pursue legal action. I read the letter, then tossed it aside. I had no intention of dragging this into a courtroom, not because I wanted to protect Vivian, but because I didn't need to. Her empire of lies had already crumbled. Her social standing was in ruins. Her family viewed her with suspicion, and every time she looked in the mirror, she'd be reminded that her own words destroyed her. That was punishment enough. I replied with a simple message. No further action required. The damage is already done. Elaine and I moved forward stronger than before. We learned that sometimes protecting peace means confronting the storm head-on. Vivian taught me that silence in the face of betrayal only feeds the betrayer. But exposing the truth, that's where real power lies. And as I settled into my new role, I realized something important. I didn't just reclaim my career, I reclaimed my voice. 2 weeks after I sent that final message to Vivian's attorney, the fallout truly began to show. Vivian wasn't just facing legal pressure, she was watching her carefully curated world collapse piece by piece. Elaine's cousin, Melissa, called us one evening, her voice practically buzzing. "You won't believe this," she said. "Vivian's been asked to step down from the garden club board, and the charity gala she chairs? They replaced her." I could hear the mixture of shock and satisfaction in Melissa's tone. Vivian had built her identity around those social positions, the elegant philanthropist, the woman everyone in town respected. Now whispers followed her wherever she went. People who once praised her were suddenly unavailable, calls unanswered, invitations revoked. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Vivian was living in the very isolation she'd created for herself. But the true climax came when George showed up at our doorstep, unannounced. Elaine opened the door, surprised to see her father standing there alone, looking 10 years older than the last time we saw him. "Can I come in?" he asked quietly. We sat in the living room, the air thick with unspoken tension. George finally broke the silence. "I owe both of you an apology," he began, his voice heavy. "For years, I watched Vivian belittle you, Nathan. I told myself it was harmless. Just her way. But I should have stepped in long before it got this far." Elaine reached for her father's hand, her eyes soft but sad. "Dad, we never thought you agreed with her, but we didn't know how much you saw." George sighed, rubbing his temples. "I saw enough. And when that recording played, I realized I didn't recognize the woman I married anymore." He looked at me then, direct, sincere. "I don't blame you for exposing her. You did what I should have done years ago." It wasn't vindication I felt in that moment. It was closure. George explained that he'd been staying at a friend's place, unable to face Vivian after everything came to light. She still doesn't think she did anything wrong, he said bitterly. She says she was protecting the family's image, but all she did was destroy it. Before he left, George said something that stuck with me. Sometimes the real strength isn't in keeping a family together. It's knowing when to walk away from the parts that poison it. In the weeks that followed, Elaine and I found a new rhythm. We focused on us, without the shadow of Vivian looming over every decision. Elaine started therapy to untangle years of emotional manipulation from her mother, and I poured my energy into my new role, thriving in ways I hadn't thought possible before. One afternoon, as I wrapped up a presentation, Marcus called. "Guess who I ran into?" he said, barely containing his amusement. "Vivian, at that fancy grocery store she loves." She wouldn't even make eye contact. I laughed, not out of spite, but because it was the first time I truly felt free. Vivian could pretend all she wanted in public, but the people who mattered knew the truth now. There was no rewinding that tape, no erasing what she'd done. Elaine and I decided to skip the holidays at the lakeside home that year. When family members asked, we told them plainly, "We're spending it in peace." Most understood. Some even admitted they were doing the same. Vivian had tried to control the narrative for so long, but once the truth was out, her grip on everyone loosened. Months later, we heard through the grapevine that Vivian rarely left the house anymore. Her reign, as Marcus liked to call it, was officially over. As for me, I stood taller, not because I'd gotten revenge, but because I'd reclaimed my dignity. I learned that exposing the truth doesn't just hold others accountable. It liberates you from carrying the weight of their lies. Vivian thought she could define my worth with whispers and deceit, but in the end, it was her own words that undid everything she built. And as Elaine and I sat on our balcony one quiet evening, watching the sunset over a city that now felt full of opportunity, I realized some victories aren't loud. They're the quiet peace that comes after standing up for yourself and knowing you'll never let anyone silence you again. It's been a year since that family reunion, since I pressed play and let Vivian's own voice dismantle the facade she'd built for decades. Life looks different now, better, quieter. Elaine and I moved to a new place, closer to the city and farther from old ghosts. Our marriage is stronger, not because we ignored the cracks, but because we faced them together. Vivian? We haven't heard much from her. She sent a letter once. Not an apology, but a carefully worded attempt to justify her actions. We didn't respond. Some things don't deserve a reply. George still calls from time to time, updating us on how he's rebuilding his own life, learning what it means to live without walking on eggshells. As for me, I'm thriving in my new role. The promotion I lost feels insignificant compared to what I gained, because here's what I've learned. Silence isn't always noble. For years I thought keeping the peace meant enduring disrespect, that biting my tongue was the price of family harmony. But real peace doesn't come from avoiding conflict. It comes from confronting the truth, even when it's uncomfortable, especially when it's family. Vivian taught me that toxic people will take as much ground as you're willing to give, and if you never draw a line, they'll rewrite the rules until you forget your own worth. I didn't expose her to be cruel. I did it because sometimes the only way to stop a bully is to shine a light on their darkest actions. So if you're sitting there, wondering whether it's worth standing up, whether calling out the person who keeps tearing you down will only make things worse, ask yourself this: how much of yourself are you willing to lose just to keep someone else comfortable? For me, the answer became clear. And pressing play that night wasn't just about revealing Vivian's lies. It was about reclaiming my voice and reminding myself that I deserve better. We all do.